Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia. Introduction: Joseph Pistone's background and undercover role. Joseph Pistone was brought up in Paterson, New Jersey. He was of Sicilian stock and learned enough about the ways of the Mafia to infiltrate the mob as a special agent for the FBI. Pistone joined the New York truck hijacking squad in 1974. 2 years later, he went underground posing as a jewel thief from Florida named Donnie Brasco. He spent 6 years working undercover in the Colombo and Bonanno families. His undercover work also took him to Miami, where he worked alongside Joe Fitzgerald, another undercover FBI agent. Through his connections, he got to know the Bonanno capo Dominic Sonny Black, Napolitano, Michael Sabella, Anthony Mira, and Bonanno soldier Benjamin Lefty Guns Ruggiero. The undercover operation ended in 1982 when Napolitano ordered Pistone to murder Anthony Whack Whack Indelicato, who was supposed to have been killed, along with his father Alphonse Sonny Red, Indelicato, Philip Philly Lucky, Giacone, and Dominic Big Trin Trinchera in 1981. This forced him to abandon his undercover role and turn evidence he had collected to the FBI. It led to over 200 indictments and over 100 convictions of members of the Mafia. Aftermath: consequences for key figures. After Napolitano was told that Pistone, alias Brasco, was an FBI agent, he refused to turn state's evidence and enter the witness protection program. He told his girlfriend that he bore no ill will against Pistone and that, if anyone had to bring him down, he was glad it was Pistone. Knowing he was going to be killed, Napolitano went to a meeting in Flatlands, Brooklyn, where he was shot dead by Bonanno Captain Frank Curley, Lino, and Ron Filicomo. Bonanno boss Joe Messina was convicted of ordering Napolitano's murder. When Napolitano's body was found on Staten Island, the hands had been cut off. A contract was put out on Ruggiero, too, but by then he had been taken into protective custody by the FBI. Nevertheless, he refused to become a government witness and join the witness protection program, and the contract on him was canceled. He was convicted of 3 counts of murder and drug trafficking in New York, and extortion, planning a bank robbery, and illegal gambling in Florida. He died of cancer in jail in 1994. A contract was also put out on Pistone. With author Richard Woodley, Pistone wrote the book Donnie Brasco, which was made into a movie in 1997 starring Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. In the book, Pistone writes of the constant battle to maintain his assumed identity when surrounded by suspicious mafiosi who had usually known each other since childhood. You could never relax with these guys because you never knew what would be heavy duty and what would be light. By midsummer of 1977, we had enough information on hijackings, burglaries, and robberies to bust Jilly's crew any day of the week. But I wasn't moving up. I was making more progress with Mira and Ruggiero in Little Italy than with Brooklyn fences. I started thinking about a direct shot at the Mafia instead of focusing on fences anymore. I discussed this idea on the phone with my supervisor, Guy Barada, and it intrigued us both immensely. We even risked meeting in person for lunch at Cockeyed Clams on 3rd Avenue near my apartment to reevaluate our goals. The more we thought, the clearer it became. If I got hooked up with a fence, that was all I'd work with. But the Mafia had structure and hierarchy. Hooking up with wise guys could give me significant access to the mob itself. It would require a bigger commitment from the FBI, increasing risks and pressures as we knew they'd never planted an agent inside the Mafia before. Eventually, the benefits of penetrating the Mafia outweighed all other considerations, so abandoning the Brooklyn fence operation for Little Italy was worth a shot. I planned to operate alone without surveillance because Little Italy is tight-knit, and you can get made in 5 minutes if you're careless. I avoided hidden tape recorders or transmitters due to the high danger of being patted down or discovered as an informant. The FBI had informants in Little Italy, but neither I nor they knew each other, reducing the risk of acting suspicious around informants. Having made this decision, I couldn't just drop out of Brooklyn suddenly because I still needed to use Jilly's crew as backup for credibility. Eventually, the downtown connection would check with the Brooklyn crew, so I wanted to ease out gradually instead of disappearing overnight. I started hanging out more with Mira and Ruggiero, and less with Jilly's crew, gradually phoning them less often by August. When I was full-time in Little Italy, Jilly remained loyal. Agents regularly visited Jilly, showing pictures of people they were after, including a picture of me, to gather info indirectly. These agents didn't know my true identity and claimed I was a jewel thief and burglar, trying to find out what Jilly knew about me. Despite the visits, Jilly wouldn't confirm whether he knew me or not, even though I had moved away from that gang already. 2 years later, Jilly was whacked while driving near his apartment, shot multiple times by a motorcyclist on a .38 caliber in a mob hit. Our information suggested they thought Jilly was talking, but he wasn't. His death was an execution meant to silence him permanently. The Colombo family, I remember them well from my encounters and shifting alliances within the Mafia world. Jerry Lang, also known as Gennaro Langella, later became underboss and acting boss of the Colombo family during Carmine the Snake's imprisonment. Guido claimed to have done more work than many made men, suggesting he had been involved in numerous hits, which is crucial for getting made. He also said he hadn't received his badge, implying he hadn't officially been recognized yet in the Mafia. Guido dismissed Alley Boy as just a punk who never earned his badge, claiming his only reason for being made was because his father was boss. Jilly warned Guido to shut up, emphasizing the importance of secrecy due to people walking in and out of the store and overhearing sensitive talk about the boss's son. I was standing outside Lefty Ruggiero's social club on Madison Street in Little Italy when Tony Mira approached and asked me to drive him to Brooklyn. That sudden request raised suspicion in my mind as my role involved moving between crews of different families, which could attract attention. I wondered if I was being taken to Brooklyn for some confrontation about my connections to the Colombo crew, or other suspicions. In the car, Mira said he had an appointment with the Snake, which triggered memories and worries about whether I was being watched or tested. I remembered Guido mentioning Alley Boy Persico, and I wondered if that had reached the Snake or if my past arrests were known to him. The thought of being grilled about Jilly's crew, what I knew, or what I was doing there made me uneasy and cautious. If the Snake heard complaints against Jilly, I feared I might be pressured to become a rat to prove my loyalty. My mind raced with options. I would not rat anyone out unless absolutely necessary, knowing that doing so would blow my credibility. Any pressure to betray someone would only result in me pulling out of the operation entirely, as my reputation was at stake. If pressed, I planned to stand firm, take the heat, and see what they would do, hoping it was just a test of my reliability. Unless, of course, they really intended to kill me if I refused to talk, and I might be dumped in the Gowanus Canal without a trace. Mira remained silent during the drive as we crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, heading toward 3rd Avenue and Carroll Street in Brooklyn's Park Slope area. We parked and waited. Then Carmine Persico arrived in a white Rolls-Royce with New Jersey plates, 40044 FLA. Which I recognized from pictures. Persico, middle-aged with thinning hair, a long neck, baggy eyes, and a fleshy nose and mouth, got out with a younger man and talked to Mira. When Mira returned, he said that was his son with him, Alley Boy. He just got straightened out, meaning made. I didn't say anything, but I understood that straightened out meant officially made in the Mafia. Mira added that Tommy LaBella was supposed to be the Colombo boss, but only in name because he was old and sick, leaving the Snake as the real boss. He mentioned needing to discuss a Shylock business with the Snake, involving the Bonanno and Colombo families, which was typical Mafia doings. Despite the tense situation, I felt a strange sense of a letdown, perhaps from the stress or the realization of what was at stake in these dealings. With some deals, I would have just said okay and given the stuff back, but not with the guns. I didn't want to give the guns back. I wanted to leverage the situation. I told them, look, I got the guns. I got 800 on me. You want it or you don't, throwing the money on the desk. I trusted their greed to make them see the green and bite the bait. There was some squabbling, with Patsy saying, we could have got more somewhere else. I responded, hey, if you can get more, take the guns and sell them elsewhere. Then I questioned, but who's going to give more than 200 apiece for guns that are registered and stolen with the numbers filed off? I added, you think I didn't push for all I could get? There's 800 of my own money involved. I told him, if you want the deal, I'll just collect from him. Jilly agreed, saying, okay, as he picked up the money and distributed it. He gave $100 each to Guido, Frankie, and Patsy, and $100 to me for peddling the guns. I handed my $100 to Agent Bursey, knowing the guns cost the FBI $700 in total. Robberies and close calls. I remember that hot August afternoon in the store when they came in from a job. Jilly, Guido, Patsy, Frankie, and a couple of other guys, one named Sonny, were there. Jilly was nervous as hell. I had never seen him so nervous before, like a deer caught in headlights. He told me, we hit this house in Bayonne this morning with a strange sense of pride and tension. The guy was a big guy. I wasn't sure if he meant physically big or important, but he was a tough customer. I thought I was going to have to shoot the motherfucker because he wouldn't open the safe, standing my ground with my gun pressed to him. I told him I'd shoot if he didn't open it, or if he tried anything funny, feeling the adrenaline rush through me. Finally, he opened the safe, and we handcuffed him, the woman, and taped his mouth shut to control the situation. He was visibly shaken, and I didn't know why, considering he'd been out on similar jobs many times before, or so I thought. They opened a black attaché case on the desk in the back room, revealing jewelry, bonds, coins, photos, and a wig. The jewelry included rings, earrings, and neck chains, some U.S. savings bonds, plastic bags of coins, and nude photographs. There was also a man's wig, sets of police handcuffs, several stolen NYPD badges, and 4 handguns inside the case. Patsy told me, "We posed as cops to get in," and Sonny added, "I was in the getaway car across the street with the motor running." Sonny explained, "I happened to be in front of a church, waiting for the guys, and a priest walks by and stops to chat. He said, 'Isn't it a lovely day?' He kept going, and I couldn't get rid of him, even as I waited for the others to come out. Finally, he said goodbye and walked away, but I could still see him when the guys came out of the house. Jilly handed me a small bunch of things, asking, 'Get rid of this junk, will you? Toss it in a dumpster in Manhattan.' It was stuff from the robbery they didn't want, like a pink purse, a brooch, earrings, nude photos, and a U.S. passport. What I really wanted was the guns, stolen property linked to the score, to tie Jilly's crew to the crime scene. We always aimed to get guns off the streets, especially the stolen ones, to prevent more crimes from happening. I told Jilly, 'If you want to move those guns, I got a guy I sold guns to from my burglaries. He might be interested.' He said we should get $300 apiece for them, and I replied, 'I'll see what I can do about the price.' He handed me the guns, a Smith & Wesson .45, a Smith & Wesson .357 Highway Patrolman, a Rome .38 Special Revolver, and a Ruger .22 automatic. Whatever the owner was, he wasn't a legitimate guy, as 2 of the guns had their serial numbers filed off, making them stolen. Most of the time, filing off serial numbers doesn't hinder us, because our labs can restore them using acid analysis. The next day, I put the guns in a paper bag and walked to Central Park at 90th St. to meet Steve Bursey, my contact agent. I handed him the bag, and we decided to offer Jilly $800 for the guns, trying to get a deal without giving too much away. You never offer the full asking price. It's government money, and we want to be hard-nosed without overpaying. Also, it shows them we're not marks but serious about bargaining with them and getting the best deal. The next day, I told the club that my contact offered me $800 for the guns, which I relayed to Patsy. He responded, "That's not enough because I previously said I could get $1,200 for them." I told him I'd try, but the guy is firm at $800, emphasizing the negotiation process was ongoing. Mysterious and haunting stories often intertwined with street-smart conversations about business. The thread of their business ran through everything, all the time, like a constant undercurrent. The business was stealing, hits, mafia politics, and shifting allegiances. People would casually mention buying steaks at a cut rate while discussing a hit. In the same sentence, they'd talk about someone getting made or a politician in their pocket. These bits of information would fly by rapidly like a dangerous dance of details. If I wasn't always alert, I would miss something crucial I needed to remember. And I couldn't just stop and ask, what was that about paying off the police chief? My job demanded I adapt my conversational style to blend perfectly with theirs. Sometimes I would change the subject abruptly or walk away deliberately. If I was talking about something criminal, I might leave the table mid-discussion. It was a tactic to suggest I wasn't particularly interested in their illegal dealings. I hoped they'd circle back to the topics later, or that I could steer the conversation. Gathering facts, names, faces, and numbers was essential for my reports. I had to remember everything until I could call my contact agent with the details. And that made my homecoming after weeks of absence feel like slipping into 2 different worlds. My family didn't know what I was involved with, so I couldn't talk about it openly. Every time I returned, focusing on family felt almost like a betrayal of my real work. The weight of secrecy pressed heavily on me, especially during quiet moments at home. Donnie Brasco's name often surfaced in conversations, cloaked in suspicion and respect. People referred to him as the man who knew too much, in whispered tones. He had a reputation for being street-smart, dangerous yet unshakably loyal. Sometimes I wondered if Donnie was truly on our side or playing his own game. He could switch from casual chatter to cold calculation in an instant, a true master. His phrases were carefully chosen, always hinting at more than they revealed. Listening to him, I realized his words often carried layered meanings about power and loyalty. Once he leaned in and said, "You gotta know when to hold and when to fold," which meant more than just poker. It's about knowing when to act or hold back. Donnie had that street-smart edge, making him invaluable yet unpredictable. I learned to read between his lines, understanding the unspoken code he lived by. Every meeting with him felt like navigating a minefield of hidden intentions. He was the kind of man who could get you both killed and promoted, sometimes simultaneously. Sometimes he'd joke, "In this game, everyone's got a price, even the cops," reflecting the corrupt nature of the political landscape we all operated in. That constant twist between danger and normalcy defined our existence daily. I knew I had to keep my senses sharp and my stories convincing always. Each move I made had to be calculated, like a chess game in the shadows. Donnie had a way of making danger seem like just another part of the job, but beneath the bravado, I sensed the tension of living between two worlds. It was a delicate balance, walking the fine line of trust and deception. Sometimes I wished I could just walk away, leave it all behind forever. But I knew I was in too deep, and quitting wasn't an option without consequence. As much as I tried to keep my cover intact, I often wondered if I was fooling myself. The Mafia's grip was tight, yet Donnie navigated it with a unique street-smart flair. His phrases and actions kept me guessing, always uncertain whether he was friend or foe. In this life, danger lurked behind every conversation, every glance, every word. And at the end of each mission, I had to suppress the fear that I might slip up. Another day I got to the club and Jilly wasn't there. I asked Vinny, "Where is everybody?" "Jilly and Guido got a contract," he said, "and they're out looking for the guy they got to hit." You don't ask questions about a hit. If they want you to know, they'll tell you. But my job was to get information if possible. When Jilly came back, I asked him, "Where were you guys?" "Me and Guido had to look for somebody," he said. He proceeded to talk about an upcoming hijacking. I tried to wrangle the conversation back to the guy they were looking for, but he wouldn't talk about it. It wasn't unusual that he wouldn't tell me. Who was I? At the time, I was just a guy who had been hanging around a few months, let alone an FBI agent. You don't just tell anybody if you have a piece of work to do. I don't know if that particular hit came off or not. Whacking somebody is something that you don't talk about. In my years with the Mafia guys, sometimes they would sit around and discuss how much work they'd done in the past. Work, meaning hits. But ordinarily, they never discussed openly any particular individual they hit, or an upcoming one. If something went wrong, they might sit around later and laugh about it. One time I was hanging out with Lefty Ruggiero at his social club in Little Italy, and he and a bunch of guys were laughing about a job. They had gotten a contract to hit a guy. They tailed this guy for a week, looking for the right opportunity. Then they were told the contract's off, don't hit the guy, and it turned out it was the wrong guy they were following. They would have hit the wrong guy. To them, it was the funniest thing in the world. What the fuck you think of that? We're following the guy for a week, and it's not even the right guy. Ha ha ha. We're out every fucking night following this jerk off. Piece of fucking luck for him, right? Ha ha ha. All this time I was trying to remember everything. Since I didn't take any notes, didn't dare to take any notes or write anything down, even in my apartment, I had to remember anything of a criminal nature discussed in conversation, any new guy that came through the clubs, the different deals and scores and the different guys involved and amounts of everything. I had to try to remember it all. Eventually, federal court cases would depend on the accuracy and credibility of my memory. It was a matter of concentration, that and little tricks, like remembering license plate numbers or serial numbers on weapons in series of threes. The frustration always was that I couldn't ask a lot of questions, which is one of the things I was trained to do as an FBI agent. A lot of the things I had to remember were things I overheard, and I couldn't ask for these things to be repeated or for what I thought I heard to be confirmed. When swag came in and out, I couldn't ask to look it over more closely or where it came from or who it was going to. I had to hope those facts were volunteered. I had to be just a hang-around guy who wasn't more interested than was good for him. Concentrating on conversations is draining. Most of the talk was idle, simplistic bullshit about the most mundane things. Getting a haircut or a new pair of bally shoes. How the Jets or Giants were doing. How the Chinese and Puerto Ricans were ruining neighborhoods. How much better a Cadillac was than a Lincoln. How we ought to drop the bomb on Iran. How we ought to burn rapists. Each guy would gladly strap the perverts in and pull the switch himself. Most of these guys, after all, were just uneducated guys who grew up in these same neighborhoods. We drove up the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, crossed the Brooklyn Bridge to Manhattan, and headed north on the FDR Drive. Obviously, Guido had just been cleaning himself, making sure nobody was following him with the run to Staten Island. We crossed the George Washington Bridge into Jersey. We took the Palisades Parkway north. A little after noon, we got to Montvale, New Jersey. At the intersection of Summit Avenue and Spring Valley Road, Guido stopped to make a call at a phone booth. He got back in the car and we just sat there. "We wait," he said. About a half hour later, a black Oldsmobile pulled up beside us. The driver motioned for us to follow him. We followed him north for a few minutes, across the Jersey line into New York. We pulled into a busy shopping center in Pearl River. Guido and the other driver got out and talked. The other guy was about 6'1" 180 with a black mustache. Guido signaled for me to get out of the car. The guy opened his trunk. There were 4 plain brown cardboard boxes in there. We transferred the boxes to Guido's trunk. Guido asked, "How much is in there?" "You got 98 pounds, the guy said. "That's what you got to pay me for." We got back in the car and headed for Brooklyn. Colombian Guido said, referring to the marijuana in the trunk, "We should get 275 a pound." On consignment, I got access to another 175 pounds. The guy said he could also supply us with coke, but not on consignment. Money up front for blow. I unloaded the boxes and put them in the back of Jilly's store. The next day when I came in, the boxes were gone. They didn't keep drugs in the store. Guido handed me a little sample bag. It was uncleaned, stalks, leaves, seeds. "Think you can move some of this?" he said. "I don't know," I said. "I never moved any of this stuff through my people. I'll ask around." I held on to the sample for a couple of days, then gave it back. "Nobody I talked to could use it," I said. None of these guys used drugs themselves, so far as I could see. To them, it was strictly a matter of business. If these guys had been dopers, it might have been a different story. They really might have tested me. But the fact was that the way you proved yourself with these guys was by making scores, making money. Jilly got 200 ladies and children's watches from a job at the airport. He brought samples into the store. As usual, he offered me a piece or all of the load if I could find a market. He gave me a sample to show a Diantis. Meanwhile, he had located a potential buyer. A couple of guys were interested in part of the load. The next afternoon, we were in the back room when these two guys walked in. I recognized one of them as a guy I had arrested 2 years earlier on a hijacking charge back before I went undercover and I was on the truck and hijack squad. I was introduced. Joe knew the other guys, but not me. I watched his face. No reaction. I wasn't going to excuse myself and leave because something might click with this guy, and if it did, I wanted to see the reaction so I would know. If I left and something clicked with this guy, I could come back to an ambush. I watched his face, his eyes, his hands. They talked about the watches, the prices. I decided to get the guy in conversation. Sometimes if a guy's nervous about you, he can hide it in his expression, just avoid you. I figured if I talked to him, I could get a reaction. Either he would talk easy, or he would try to avoid conversation with me. I had to be sure, because there was a good chance I would run into this guy again. "By the way," I said, "you got any use for men's digitals?" I had one and showed it to him. "Looks like a good watch," he said. "How much?" "You buy enough, you can have them for 20 each. Let me check it out, get back to you." "Where can I reach you?" "I'm right here every day," I said. The conversation was okay. There was no hitch in his reactions. They chatted a few more minutes and left. The whole thing took maybe 20 minutes. The guy simply hadn't made me. Those situations occur from time to time, and there's nothing you can do about them, except be on your toes. A couple days later, I asked Jilly, Joe, and that other guy, did they buy the watches? He said, "Yeah, they took some of mine, but they didn't have any market for yours." From time to time, somebody in Jilly's crew would ask me if I had any good outlets for marijuana or coke. I was non-committal. At that time, I wasn't trying to milk the drug side, other than to report back whatever I saw and heard. The FBI wasn't so much into the drug business then. We didn't want to get involved in any small drug transactions because we couldn't get authority to buy drugs without making a bust. We were still operating on a buy-bust standard, meaning that if we made a buy, we had to make a bust, and that would have blown my whole operation. So in order not to complicate the long-range plans for my operation, I pretty much had to steer clear of drug deals. According to the Mafia mythology, there was supposed to be a code against dealing drugs. In the old days, there wasn't a huge amount of money to be made in drugs, and they didn't do it. Now that's where the money is. Forget any so-called code. Like anything else with the Mafia, if there's money to be made, they're gonna do it. "No, I'm just gonna hang out." "I got nothing to do," I said. "Take a ride with me." "I gotta go to Jersey." We took Jilly's car, a blue 1976 Coupe de Ville. We drove across the Verrazano Narrows Bridge to Staten Island. We drove around Staten Island for a while, then recrossed the bridge back to Brooklyn. I said, "I thought you said you had to go to Jersey." "I do," he said. "I gotta meet a guy." A lot of people have the misconception that mob guys are all big drinkers or dopers. Some of them are. A greater proportion of young guys do drugs than older guys. But so many guys don't do anything that you don't stand out by saying, "No, it's no big deal." Tony Mira killed 20 or 30 people, and he drank only club soda. The thing is, even though it's a fake world for you as an undercover agent, it's a real world for the people that you're dealing with. And you have to abide by the rules in that world. And those rules include how you establish your own standards, credibility, and individuality. I know one or two guys that drank or did drugs while they were undercover just because they thought they had to do that to blend in or show they were tough guys. It was an enormous mistake. You can't compromise your own standards and personality. Smart, wise guys will see right through your act. You look like somebody that has no mind of his own, hence no strength. I was down in Miami one time working with Fitz for a week. I had told Jilly and his guys that I would be down there, but I didn't call them back with a telephone number where I could be reached. As it turned out, they had tried to find me because they wanted me in on a big job they were going to pull down there. They had connections in Florida. Guido told me that he had been dealing drugs in Florida for 9 years, especially in the Key West area, where he had the fix-in with the police department and the district attorney's office. Vinny told me that he had a friend who owned a nursery on Staten Island where he was growing a big marijuana crop, and that when it was harvested in August, Guido would take it to Florida for sale. In this instance, they had information about a house in Fort Lauderdale where they could pull off an easy $250,000 cash score. It was a four-man job. When they couldn't locate me, Jilly joined Guido and Patsy and Frankie. When I got back to New York, they filled me in on what had happened. They had pulled off the job and it had been a disaster. The information their Florida tipster gave them was that an elderly lady kept the cash and diamonds in a safe. Guido bought safe-cracking tools for the job in Miami. They went to the house, flashed their detective shields to the lady, and said they were on an investigation and needed to come in. They handcuffed the lady, but there was no safe, and there was no $250,000 in cash. What they found were bullet holes in the ceiling, bank books showing that a huge deposit was made the day before in a safe deposit box, and a little cash lying around. By the time they accounted for plane fares and tools and other expenses, they came out of the job with about $600 apiece. Their information had been good, but late. Later, their tipster filled in the story. The lady's husband had died and left the $250,000. He had promised a large chunk of that to his nephew, but the widow didn't like the nephew and didn't want to give him the money. The nephew came to collect. He tried to frighten the lady. He pulled out a gun and fired 2 bullets into the ceiling, but she didn't give up the money. The next day, she put it all in a safe deposit box. That was the day before Guido and Jilly went there to steal it. If I'd have known all this ahead of time, Guido told me, I never would have pulled the job. I called the bartender over. I want you to know that this guy is out of line here, I say, and you're a witness to what he's saying. If anything happens, the drunk keeps it up. I know you from New York. Don't turn away from me. Who you with? I lean over to Fitz. He grabs me again. I'm going to have to clock him, I say. No problem, Fitz says. He is standing there, all 6'5" of him. When you're ready, let me know. I'll take care of those other 2 guys. Fitz clocks the second guy, and then the third guy, one right after the other. All 3 of them sink to the floor. Everybody in the joint turns away. Where wise guys are concerned, nobody wants to know anything. I say to the bartender, you saw and you heard, right? Yeah, he says. So if anything comes down regarding this, just say how this guy was out of line. Fitz knows how to reach me and my people in New York. It turned out the guy was a member of the Lucchese family. Word did get right back to New York. Everything was smoothed over. It helped my image. Fitz and I cruised the Miami area hangouts that had been identified as likely places for contacts. Sneaky Pete's, Charlie Brown's Steak Joint, the Executive Club, Tony Roma's, Gold Coast up in Fort Lauderdale. But we weren't able to lure the big-timers into conversation. For several months, I went back and forth between the Colombos and the Bonannos, between New York and Florida. Fitz and I were out one night in a nightclub near Fort Lauderdale. We were sitting at the bar. Fitz introduced me to a lot of people he knew in there. This is Don from New York. Guys were going into the John to snort coke. I was just sitting at the bar bullshitting with a couple of half-ass wise guys and their girlfriends. Then this one guy comes out of the John and comes over to me holding this little open vial. He holds it out to me and says, here, Don, have a snort. I smack his arm, sending the bottle flying and the cocaine spraying all over the place. I grab him by the lapels and hoist him. I don't do that stuff, I say, and you had no business offering it to me. Don't ever offer it to me again. I make money off it, but I don't use it. I keep my head clear at all times. Dig all my stuff, he whines. Write it off to experience, I say. You want to fuck up your head, that's up to you. Don't bring it around me. I didn't do these things to be a tough guy. But with things like drinking and drugs, you can't be a fence sitter around these guys. If you smoke a joint or take a snort the first time, maybe just to show that you're a regular guy, or if you say maybe later, it gives the impression that you do drugs. If you're a fence sitter, then you're in a bind. You just invite people to keep offering it to you. And if you say, not now, and then keep refusing and putting it off, they begin to wonder what's up with this guy. But if you draw the line right in the beginning, I don't do it, I ain't ever gonna do it, then that's it. Nobody cares anymore. Building credibility, meeting key figures and incidents in Miami. I had met Anthony Mira in March of 1977. He invited me downtown to Little Italy. He had a little food joint called the Bus Stop Luncheonette at 115 Madison Street. We used to hang out there, or across the street at a dive called the Holiday Bar. Mira also introduced me to Benjamin Lefty Guns Ruggiero, like himself a soldier in the Bonanno family. Like Mira, Lefty was known as a hitman. He had a social club at 43 Madison Street, just up the street from Mira's bus stop luncheonette. Mira used to hang out there. He introduced me to Lefty on the sidewalk outside the club. Don, this is Lefty, a friend of mine, Lefty. Don. Lefty was in his early 50s, about my height, 6 feet, lean and slightly stoop-shouldered. He had a narrow face and intense eyes. Mira turned away to talk to somebody else. Lefty eyed me. I'm with him, I say, pointing to Fitz. He had a cigarette raspy voice. Hyper. Where are you from? California, I said. Spent a lot of time between there and Miami. Now I'm living up at 91st and 3rd. How long you known Tony? Couple months. Mainly the last few months I've been hanging out in Brooklyn, 15th Avenue, with a guy named Jilly. I know Jilly, Lefty said. Prior to that introduction, I was never invited into Lefty's club, and you can't go in without permission when you're not connected. From that time on, I would go down to Lefty's almost every day to meet Mira. So I got to know Lefty. I then began dividing my time between Mira, Lefty, and the Bonanno guys in Little Italy, and Jilly and the Colombos in Brooklyn. Since I wasn't officially connected to anybody, it was permissible, if not encouraged, to move between two groups. But it was also a lot to handle time when you're trying to stay sharp on every detail. Agent Joe Fitzgerald had set himself up with an identity, an apartment, and the rest, just as I had. He was doing a good job in the Miami area, and he fingered a lot of fugitives for arrest. But for whatever reasons, the operation there didn't catch on as readily. Most of the guys Fitz was able to get involved with were guys that were chased out of New York, small-time dopers, credit card scammers, and the like. No real heavyweights. Now that I had some credentials with both the Colombo and Bonanno people, we thought that maybe I could help stimulate some contacts in Miami. So from time to time, I would go down there and hang out with Fitz, letting people know that I was connected around Madison Street and in Brooklyn. I had a dual role hanging out with Fitz. First was to help him if I could, by being a connected guy from New York who he could point to for credibility. Second was to build up my own credentials. I would tell people in New York that I was going down to Miami to pull some sort of job. I would be seen down there hanging out in the right places. Word always gets back. So you always had to stay in character. One time we were at an after-hours joint named Sammy's, where a lot of wise guys hung out. We were at the bar. Fitz was talking to a couple of women to his right. I was sitting on his left at the L of the bar, and around the corner of the L were 3 guys talking together. One of them was drunk, and I recognized him as a half-ass wise guy from New York. This drunk starts hollering at me. Hey you, I know you. I ignore him, and he reaches over and grabs my arm. Hey, I'm talking to you, he says. I know you from somewhere. Who you with? I'm with him, I say, pointing to Fitz. Not only is he drunk, but he is also saying things he shouldn't be saying around wise guys, asking things he shouldn't be asking, such as about what family I was with. I signal to the 2 guys with him. Your friend is letting the booze talk, I say. He's out of line, so I suggest you quiet him down. They shrug. Each sentence can be long if the input requires it, but must not exceed 30 words. If a sentence is longer, split into 2 or more natural sentences without altering the content. I knew all along from the time he pushed it to the gun that I would give him a name, because once he went that far in front of everybody, he wouldn't back off. But even among fellow crooks, you don't ever give up a source or contact easily. You have to show them that you're a stand-up guy, that you're careful and tough in protecting people you've done jobs with. So I was making it difficult for them. I acted as if I were really torn, mulling it over. Then I said, okay, as a favor to Jilly, I'm going to give you a name. You can check with this guy, but if anything happens to this guy, I'm going to hold you responsible. I'll come after you. I gave him the name of a guy in Miami. He said, everybody sit tight. I'm going to go and see if we can contact somebody down there that knows this guy of yours. He left the room and shut the door. So now I had a couple of worries. That had been 7 months before. I wasn't absolutely sure that the informant got the message. And if he had been told, would he remember now 7 months later? If the informant blew it now, I was going to get whacked, no doubt about it. The other guys in the crew here didn't care. They were on the fence. But Patsy or his pal Frankie would kill me, both because of the animosity between us and because they had taken it too far to back down. While Patsy was gone, I just sat around with the other guys playing gin and bullshitting as if everything were normal. Nobody mentioned the problem, but I was thinking hard about how the hell I was going to get out of there, at least to make a phone call. After a couple of hours, I figured everybody had relaxed, so I said, I'm going to go out and get some coffee and rolls. I'll take orders for anybody. You ain't going anywhere, Frankie says, until Patsy comes back. What are we here, children? I say. I got no reason to take off, but it's lunchtime. Sit down, Frankie said. If it came to it, I would have to bust out of there somehow, because I was not just going to sit there and take a bullet behind my ear. There was a door out to the front, which I figured Patsy had locked when he went out. There was a back door which was nailed shut, never used, and there were 4 windows all barred. I didn't have many options. I could make a move for the gun on the desk, that was about it. But I wouldn't do anything until Patsy came back with whatever the word was, because I might luck out. And if I could stick with it and be lucky, I would be in that much more solid with the Colombo crew. We sat there for hours. Everybody but me was smoking. We all sat and breathed that crap, played cards, and bullshitted. It was maybe 4:30 when Patsy came back. Instantly, I could see I was okay. He had a look on his face that said I had beaten him again. He said, "Okay, we got an answer, and your guy okayed you." Everybody relaxed. Everybody but me. With what had gone down, I couldn't let that be the end of it. You can't go through all that and then just say, "I'm glad you found out I'm okay, and thank you very much." The language of the street is strength. That's all they understand. I had been called. I had to save some face, show everybody they couldn't mess with me. I had to clear the air. I had to smack somebody. The gun was still lying there. But now we were all standing up, starting to move around and relax. I wanted to take Patsy first, but Frankie was the one between me and the gun. I circled around, casually edging over to him. I slugged him and he went down. Patsy jumped on me and I belted him a few times. Then the rest of the crew jumped in and wrestled us apart. I had counted on the crew breaking it up before it got out of hand, so I could make my point before the 2 of them got at me at once. Patsy was sitting on the floor staring up at me. "You fucking punks," I said. "Next time you see me, you better walk the other way." Guido, the toughest of all of them, stepped in front of me and looked at everybody else. "That's the end of it about Don," he said. "I don't want to hear nothing else from nobody about Don not being okay." Maintaining identity. The beef with Patsy and Frankie. One morning not long afterward, I walked into the store. Everybody was there, but nobody was saying much. Jilly took my elbow and said, "Don, let's take a walk." We went outside. He said, "Look, Don, nothing for nothing, but Patsy and Frankie, they don't feel comfortable around you. They got a beef. What's the problem? They feel like they don't know you well enough. They don't want you involved in any more jobs until they know more about you. They want the name of somebody that can vouch for you down in Miami where you said you did a lot of work, so they can feel more comfortable with you." "Well, how do you feel, Jilly?" I said. "We've done stuff together, right? You know who I am? You got any problems with me?" "No, I got no problems with you." Jilly was uncomfortable. "But I grew up with these guys, you know? They've been my partners for years, since before they went to the can. So they got this little beef, and I gotta go along with them. Okay? Fuck them, Jilly. I'm not giving them the name of anybody. Let's just take it easy, okay, Don? Let's go in and talk it over, try to work it out." Jilly was the made guy, the boss of this crew. I had rubbed these other guys the wrong way, and they had gone first to Jilly and put the beef in with him, which was the right way to do it. He had to respect their wishes because of the proper order. He had known them longer than he knew me, even though he had faith and trust in me. It was their beef, but it was his responsibility to get it resolved one way or the other. He was handling it the proper way. He came to me and talked to me first. Then, when I hard-nosed it, said no right up front, I couldn't give in right away. I had to string it out and play the game. He said we had to sit down and talk about it. When you sit down, everybody puts their cards on the table and airs their beefs out. And Jilly had to lean toward them in granting their request about getting somebody to vouch for me in Florida. At that point, I wasn't worried, because things were being handled in the right way, according to the rules. We went back in the store. I went over to Patsy and said, "You got a beef? You say you pulled off all those scores down in Miami before you came here," Patsy said. "But we don't know nothing about that. And you seem to want to say a lot around here. So Frankie and me want to know somebody you did those jobs with so we can check you out." "You don't need to check me out," I said. "I've been around here 5-6 months. Jilly and the other guys are satisfied. I don't have to satisfy you just because you were in the can." "Yeah, you do," he said. "Let's go in the back and sit down." Everybody walked into the back room. Patsy sat down behind the desk. "You could be anybody or anything," he said. "Maybe you're a stoolie. So we want to check you out, and we need the name of somebody to vouch for you." "I'm not giving you any name." Patsy opened a desk drawer and took out a .32 automatic and laid it on the desk in front of him. "You don't leave here until you give me a name." "I'm not giving up the name of somebody just to satisfy your curiosity," I said. "You don't know me, I don't know you. How do I know you're not a stoolie? You got a fucking smart mouth." "You don't give me a name, the only way you leave here is rolled up in a rug," he said. "You do what you gotta do, because I ain't giving you a name." It was getting pretty tense in there. Jilly tried to be a mediator. "Don, it's no big deal. Just let him contact somebody. Then everybody feels better and we forget about it.